Good morning, everyone. Happy Father's Day. I was thinking about a way to celebrate Father's Day, and I thought it would be fun, interesting, thought-provoking to bring my dad in and talk about the passage for today and see it from his perspective and see how pastoring for him was different than pastoring for me. And so welcome. And my dad's name is Lauren Martin. I think a lot of you have met him, but for any watching online also, this is my dad. And you are no longer a pastor, correct? How
Correct.
long?
No, I'm still ordained. I still have credentials through Mountain States, but I do not have active charge of a congregation.
Okay. And
That's been in 2014.
2014 was when you stopped.
Mm-hmm. So it's been about 5 years, 5.5.
Wow. Yeah. It seems like a long time ago, but also not that long. And how many years before that did you pastor?
22.
22.
I started in 1992. May of 1992. You were born May of 1993. So I was a pastor for 1 year before you were born.
Okay.
Are you hungry?
I'm recording for tomorrow.
Yeah, really?
No, it's okay. Nick just got home.
Are you recording in this moment?
Yes.
Hi, Nick.
He's trying to give me food, which is very sweet.
Happy Father's Day tomorrow.
Happy Father's Day to you. More so.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. We'll call you tomorrow. Maybe Mariah will let me join the call this time.
All right.
Told you for your birthday and I missed it. Anyway, all right, I got it.
All right, bye. Well, it's live, isn't it?
Yep, it's live. I knew that there was a potential of that happening, keeping the door open, but that's okay. So shall I read the text for this morning?
You're going to read the text.
Yeah, the text is from Genesis 21, verses 8 through 21. And I believe this is the NRSV version. And I want to say for those who listened to last week's sermon, this happens after what we had just heard about, how God came to Abraham and Sarah and told them that you would have a son and to name your son Isaac, which means laughter. So when I start here in verse 8 and it says the child grew, that is who they're referring to. The child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, playing with her son Isaac. So she said to Abraham, "Cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not inherit along with my son Isaac." The matter was very distressing to Abraham on account of his son. But God said to Abraham, "Do not be distressed because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you, for it is through Isaac that offspring shall be named for you. As for the son of the slave woman, I will make a nation of him also, because he is your offspring." So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, along with the child, and sent her away. As she departed and wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba, when the water in the skin was gone, she cast the child under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite him a good way off, about the distance of a bow shot, for she said, "Do not let me look on the death of this child." As she sat opposite him, she lifted up her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the boy, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What troubles you, Hagar? Do not be afraid, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Come, lift up the boy and hold him fast with your hand, for I will make a great nation of him." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. She went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy, and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran and his mother got a wife for him from the land of Egypt. So I have a few questions for Lauren. It's funny to call you Lauren. For Dad, and I have them in two sections. So one, questions about the passage, and then the next section is just general questions. But to start, I'm going to ask, how does reading this passage as a father change your outlook on this passage?
I don't know how much attention I paid to specifically the father part. Obviously, having children, you pay attention to the relationship of the parents and the children in this. Could I ever, put my child under the bush and know that death is coming? That's a very specific thing. But you know what? I don't know that I can differentiate my life as a father and my life as a pastor. I'm not sure that I'm really good at differentiating that. But I can tell you, what I will tell you is that when I study a text, and I will study the text for the purpose of preaching. I don't know that the seminary taught me to do this, because I didn't really ask the seminary to teach me to be a pastor. I went to seminary to be a teacher, to go on to get a doctorate. But I did have one preaching class. But I have experienced that when I read a text, I always pay attention to the emotional content, the dynamic of narrative in the text. If there's a story, I try to pay attention to the main part of the story. So in this story, it's all about conflict. I mean, there is just layers and layers of conflict. So to an extent, I guess I identify a little bit with Abraham. Not that I see myself as some sort of spiritual pioneer or anything, but he has a wife and he has a child.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, I identify with him. It's kind of humorous, but I do identify with the idea that this story is about the weaning of Isaac, and it's a big deal. I don't know how old he would have been. Maybe your mom, since she's a lactation consultant, would say, well, in that tradition, he might have been 2 years old. I have no idea. But he's probably walking, and it's a big deal. And so Abraham plans this huge celebration, which goes horribly. Toward the end, it's like there's this, I don't want to exaggerate, but there's this conflict between the two wives. And it's not the first time that there is conflict. There's been conflict before. So anyway, I pay attention to the conflict. Maybe that's part of my personality. There's a conflict with for Abraham, how long will it take God to fulfill this promise? That's one conflict. To have a son, to have a generation, to see the promise fulfilled, the promise that came from all the way back in chapter 12. There's a conflict between Abraham and Sarah. There is a conflict between Sarah and Hagar. There's conflict between life and death in this story. There's conflict that is inclusion and exclusion. There's conflict so Abraham fathers a child, and yet Yahweh says, it's okay. Send her away, send the child away. I'll provide. I forget whether or not he says he'll provide, but Yahweh says it's okay. Go ahead and send her away. And he needs Abraham needs reassurance from Yahweh before he does this. Well, I get that as a father. I mean, this is not only do you love your son at this point, it's which son is going to be the one out of the inheritance, and he's told it's going to be Isaac. So obviously my favorite parts, I have a couple favorite parts that I like in this story, and again, because of my personality, the part where Abraham gets this bag of supplies, water and food, and sends her off into the wilderness with supplies. I've created emergency bags for you in your car, and Sierra's got an emergency bag, and we got one in our car. I like that idea of being provided for when we're out in the wilderness. I like the part where Yahweh provides water in the wilderness. It's a desperate situation. Hagar is at the end. The water has run out. The supplies have ended. And there is this opening of Hagar's eyes, and it's a Yahweh provision in the wilderness when things are very, very bleak. And so I have one more favorite thing, and then I'll shut up. I love the part where it says that Ishmael was playing with Isaac. So as a parent, when your kids play together, I can remember sometimes when I was preaching and I would look back in that center aisle between the two rows of pews.
Yeah.
And kids would be in the center aisle just playing very quietly with something. And I'm like, it just fills the heart to know that these children just accept each other. These children get along. They don't know about adult opinions. They don't have they haven't learned differences. They just know that this person's somebody I can play with. And they have a bond based upon playing together. That's very exciting to me.
Well, my next question, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, is in seminary we're taught to look for the trouble in the text, and then relate that to the trouble in the world. And then the next part is the grace in the text and the grace in the world. Okay. But what stands out the most, maybe, as the biggest kind of tension?
Yeah. I think the biggest tension, I guess I'd have to really think through, what does Abraham believe about the fulfillment of Yahweh's promise?
Yeah.
I think he believed Yahweh. I mean, he bought into the covenant that his generation, and yet there is this conflict of they're not having children. There is no evidence that this is going to happen, and so Sarai, steps in and says, "Hey, I know how to solve this problem for God.
Yeah.
I'm going to provide my maidservant." So I think the big problem is, can God be trusted? I think the biggest question in all of this is, can God's promises be trusted?
What does this passage reveal about the nature of God?
Yeah. It's true that Mariah shared these questions with me beforehand so I could prepare for them. Yeah. So what I wrote for this is that it's funny in a way that while the story in the text begins with Isaac being weaned, and Abraham celebrates with a big party, the whole next part is not about Isaac. He just completely gets lost. And then all the conflict and all the behaviors that are part of this story. I say God would not be called a God of peace if there were no conflicts in our life. The Bible is so full of stories of conflicts. I'm not saying that to excuse bad behavior or to minimize bad behavior. But conflict is such a norm as the first human beings on earth. As we always say, conflict is normal, violence is a choice. And on a non-godly choice. So the nature of God is not afraid of our conflicts. I guess that's what I would tell you, that this text means to me the most, is that Yahweh is there in the midst of all of our mess, all of our brokenness, all of our messiness. God forgives, God intervenes, God rescues, God provides, God hears, God opens eyes. Yeah. And that's there's so much more that could be said, but that's what my first thoughts were.
And then tying on to that, how do you think this passage applies to today? There's no conflict today. It doesn't apply at all.
Oh, it does. It does in so many ways. It gives me hope. This story gives me hope that God is present in the midst of our brokenness right now. I have to believe. Right now, this very time, racism is brokenness. Politics reveals brokenness. How we talk about, how we care for, how we belong to creation. Different people use different words, but how we treat this land of that we have been given for this time. There are so many conflicts. There is unequal access to employment. There's unequal access to education. There's unequal access to healthcare, to economics, how people have access to providing for their families. It can be rather gloomy, but I don't have any big wild answers except to have the calm inner belief that God is still present in the midst of all of our brokenness, and God is not worried. This is not the first time that people have behaved poorly. How does the passage apply to today? That we are still looking for those wells of water. We are still looking for those places that sustain. I mean, we are living in such an unsustainable relationships in so many ways, that they are there. I have to, again, it's a statement of faith. It's a statement of hope that there are those wells. There are those new generations of people who are being called. You represent one of them, I believe, that will nourish and that will lead us, and you will sustain for your generation. And then you will pass it on to the next generation. I hope you get to be part of a story of tapping somebody on their shoulder and saying, I think you have gifts of ministry. Can we talk about this?
Well, I thought of one last question. I know we'll end it here, but
right.
There are fathers in our congregation and there are grandfathers in our congregation. Do you have any words of advice, love, blessing to send to the fathers, other fathers?
Wow, you did put me on a spot.
I'm putting him on the spot.
Yeah. You know, just to keep one's heart open and love is the greatest gift. It is the greatest gift. Life can be wounding. I mean, that's normal. And so sometimes, like the turtle that retreats into its shell, to sort of say, "Oh, I don't want to feel that pain again." So honey, sorry, daughter, it took me about 5 years to have courage to go back to church and be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that's so the advice I would have, it doesn't matter if there have been troubles in your life or not, but life begins again when you are vulnerable and you are loved. You extend love, you give away love, and you feel love. So I would say just stay in relationship, work through those difficult ones, work through the ones that require all the energy, and know that it's a gift. I don't know. Sorry, honey. It's not very profound or anything, but and it's kind of just fun to watch your kids. It's fun to watch you and Sierra, and to see how you grow and blossom and become your own person.
Yeah. Sierra, my sister, is on the way to Colorado right now. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dad. Love you.
Love you too. Happy Father's Day.